Hey friend, listen. I know the world is scary right now. Corruption, war, inflation, demographics, degeneracy, disease, unrest, hatred, and despair. We didn't come here to tell you how it is, but that it's going to get way better.
Got a good thing coming, and it's all I need. Everything I wanted, just wait and see.
Better by Bitcoin.
I wish we could just play that music for like 4 minutes because it's just such a jam.
Yeah, it's great. Get you rolling, gets you in the mood. All right, welcome to the show. Today we wanted to talk about, we got myself, Bondor, JD, Anton, and Corey with us. Today we wanted to talk about this crazy phenomenon that just permeates our civilization, our society, which is this proclivity, or really need to solve the problem with the very thing that is causing the problem. Why do we do this? Why do we go down this route in the first place? Why do we kick the can down the road? Anton, before the show is on, I think you had an example of this phenomenon. Do you want to lay that out for us so we can get the ball rolling?
Yeah, absolutely. So if people don't know what the cobra problem is, this could be apocryphal for all I know, but it's a really good metaphor. So in India, during the British colonial rule, there were a lot of cobras, and cobras are this dangerous animal. And so they said, hey, if you bring a dead cobra, we'll pay you, a few pence, essentially, rupees. I don't know what the currency was at the time. And so people very quickly realized if they bred cobras, then they could just bring these extra cobras. And so it ended up like 10xing how many cobras were in India. And the same thing happens in a city like Los Angeles with homelessness. There's $1 billion to solve the homeless problem. They appoint all these people to head up these organizations. So the more homelessness there is, the more money that gets thrown at the problem, the more these people can make off the homeless problem. And so that if they increase homelessness, they're just going to get more money. And that same thing happens with a lot of, it's basically a fiat creation.
It's interesting. It's actually the lack of quality problem, right? Like the reason we had, and the answer to this, or rather the current term for it, is planned obsolescence, right? This was something that was coined by some of the bigger behemoths of the day, where they just have a planned launch schedule for the different products, Samsung or whoever. And as they expect you to upgrade your phone or your watch or whatever annually, they are incentivized to make an inferior product. It's the exact opposite of people who build a cathedral, right? If you're building St. Mark's Cathedral or whatever it is, you're building something in the physical world that is meant to stand the test of time, thousands of years, hopefully. You're going to put everything into making sure it's the best, highest quality thing. And so, yeah, it's interesting. It's the total upstream incentive problem of like people didn't think this all the way through.
Yeah. I started my career in healthcare, and it's all over healthcare. I promise. I was at the biggest kidney dialysis company. I was working in their corporate office, and the way that CMS, which is the counterparty negotiator for healthcare payments for the government, the way that they negotiate is they determine how much money they're going to spend on it, and then they tell the companies how much money they're going to spend on everything. So there's an entire operations department in this kidney dialysis company of about 1,000 people that literally just fights with the provider, with the reimbursement for Medicare and Medicaid, about how much money they're going to make on each treatment. It's this massive inefficiency. And the way that negotiation goes is the government says, well, how much money are you making from private insurers? And then the private company has to tell them, well, we make this much per private insurance patient. And then they say, we're going to determine how much profit we think is worthwhile for you. And then we're going to give you, we're going to underpay that. So that was literally how the negotiation went. And it was shocking to me because absolutely nothing in those negotiations with the private insurers or with CMS had anything to do with how much the treatment cost to perform, or whether or not it was done well. It wasn't tied to patient outcome. It wasn't tied to anything. It's literally an industry that sustains itself from people who have the job so that they can continue to have the job. The incentives are completely misaligned. And in that case in particular, that's 8% of the US healthcare spending is negotiated that way, right? You could reasonably say you have spent, a couple percent every year of your tax dollars on that nonsense, that absolute nonsense. And it can make you, right, it's hard to find a tidy villain in that. It's just a complete mismatch of misincentives that perpetuates itself just to perpetuate itself.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the Upton Sinclair quote, which I'm trying to find. But, oh, here you go. It's the, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it, right? The idea that, man, if we did this correctly, none of us would be employed. So we're just never going to do it correctly. Like,
do you guys think it's a pendulum? Do you think innovation and advancement is actually the reason we have so much inefficiency, because so much efficiency and so much of a lack of quality? Like, have we swung so far over on the efficiency side of the pendulum that we just left quality behind? And do you think we'll go back?
Hard no, but somebody else can field it.
I think it totally depends on I think it totally depends on what field you're talking about, right? And which generation, because our parents, the boomers, were all about quality over or quantity over quality, and millennials and younger are kind of the opposite. They'd rather have a tenth as many things if they were higher quality things. So whether it's a pendulum or not, or just a generational issue, I think we'll see it change demographically over time.
Oh, go on, Anton.
I don't know if it's a pendulum or a circle. If you think of like the book, The Fourth Turning, in that idea is that history is a cycle, and there are these like epochs that keep happening. And when you talk about, I don't know, the thing that was brought to my mind was, I remember my grandfather, who was born in probably, he fought in World War II. So he was probably born in maybe like 1917, 1918, somewhere around there. I just remember that he was a kid during the Great Depression, and he had a good job later in life. He worked for 50 years for a college and ended up retiring. And I remember he used to make a cup of coffee in the morning, and then he would only drink half of it. And then he would fill the other half up with water, and he would eventually later on in the day microwave the cup of coffee, drink the rest of the coffee. Whereas for my parents, my mom could go to Sam's Club and buy, giant tins of Folgers coffee. And so there was this like extreme abundance, but it was this really crappy coffee. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't really have like a full way to tie all that up, but that's just all to say. It's a cycle.
Well, I think actually, so let me posit this as an idea. So if people are familiar with some of the currency things that have happened, right? I'll use gold because it's the easiest. An easier story, a better story would be the stones of Yop, but that's kind of a cycle thing. But let's just go with like currency, right? When gold was first kind of like started as a currency, it was this thing that was really hard to make. It's like, cool, this is valuable because it's really hard to do. And then, the next part of the cycle is like making it more efficient. And so what they did was they made it efficient, and then they made like, okay, well, let's just all put it at one place and do banks. And so it went from, you have all this gold, but it's really hard to keep safe. Then, all right, well, you can just put it in a bank and we'll issue you like paper treasury notes. So you can like have a receipt that says you have all this paper. And then, well, now let's centralize all of those banks and not just make them private entities, but make them a government. And so now this government has all of this thing, and now they're going to put it under the Fed or some type of centralized entity that's going to issue, well, we're going to do more paper. But by the way, we don't actually have to have enough gold in the vault to actually get to this point. where you can redeem it. Like we're gonna give you more paper than we actually have gold for, and so then you kind of get to that next part of the cycle, which is that one, and now you kind of need to go back to the reinvention part, where it's like, all right, well, so now we have more gold or more paper than we do gold, so we're on the opposite side of the spectrum where we had started the paper here, and now we have a crap ton more paper than we do gold, which is the opposite. So we're in this imbalance, and so it's like this imbalance is kind of driving us to this next place where we are now when we come to Bitcoin. So it's really interesting to see kind of how this abundance cycle with is kind of like, go back to the Folgers on your mom is like, all right, we have really high quality coffee, but I want to like make sure it lasts a lot longer. So I'm going to probably water it down. It's like, well, now we have a crap ton of really crappy coffee. And it's like, well, now nobody cares about coffee because it's not even coffee anymore. It's grown in a lab. And so now we're going to get back to, it's like, well, I want to make real coffee again. Right. It's like, I think you are right. Like it's more of a circle than it is a pendulum.
I tend to think about it more deterministically, as in these are technological advancements that provide real value and they build on each other. So get back to the original thing, why do we solve all the problems by creating more problems? In a fiat denominated world, we do this because one of the core natures of the money we have is that we can just always print more of it. We can always just get into more debt, like paper over our problems. We can always kick the can down the road, even if it's like the most insane, biggest can that you never think you can kick, because it's just paper currency that, oh, well, just whatever, more debt, more inflation, etc. Now you're still eating those costs in the inflation, right? But when you look back at gold, well, did they have that problem? Not really. They had a whole different set of problems, and those problems had different consequences. One of the things I was thinking about today was that, like, under a gold currency, you have a robust return for colonialism. If you have stronger weapons, you can just invade somebody's nation, take all of their gold, and because you already have the stronger weapons, like, well, one, the war that you start won't destroy any of the gold, and then two, because you have the stronger weapons, you'll be able to defend the extraction of all that gold back to your home base, right? Now, think about fiat. Well, in fiat, it's all these weird debt structures and all this other kind of opaque backroom deals and all that. So it's not really like, you can't really invade a country like you can with a military and expect that you'll get a return on that. But you do need to use your military to invade countries to enforce that the fiat currency you have and that you use retains its value, right? Now, you jump into Bitcoin, it's a totally different dynamic. It's, okay, well, you have a fiat, or you have a currency that is predicated on information entirely, kind of like debt is predicated on information, but you don't need the violence to support the information, or you don't need the violence to support the currency at all. So there really is no return for like the colonial expenditure at all, because there's no way to extract the information. And if you go to war to try and get Bitcoin, there's a high likelihood that you'll randomly bomb the wrong place and destroy the private keys. So you can kind of see this, like, it's not necessarily cyclical. It's determined by, like, the technology, the state of the technology determines the outcome of the system. So getting back to the original question of why do we solve the problem with just papering over the problem? Well, because the state of the system determines the outcome of the system, and we can just print more money. So that's what we do.
It incentivizes that behavior, right? And I think,
yeah.
And for the past little over 100 years, where we've had term limits, we haven't had a single person ever, including the people who started fractional reserve banking, including the people who oversaw fully leaving the gold standard, who have had to pay for that decision. No one who made that decision had to pay for that decision. It makes it incredibly easy. And that includes the citizens who voted for those people and who bore those costs, right? If you can print the money, people say tax and spend, but in reality, our system is spend then tax. You determine how much you're going to spend, and then you determine how much tax you're going to There's no counterparty negotiator with the government. So if you don't have the tax dollars and you can just invent it, you're essentially just taking on a very, very long-term loan against the value of your people's assets, and no one feels that within your term. So if you're on a 4-year term or an 8-year term, within 4 to 8 years, if you keep the inflation below 25% in 4 years, which is what Biden hit, this is when it became a huge problem. If you can just keep it below that, you're going to get all the way through your term doing what you want to do, and your citizens will bear the cost of that, but they won't really feel it until whoever succeeds you. And I think that level of being able to promise while disrespecting your own scarcity has led to this kind of repetition of this problem over and over and over again.
Anton, I want to ask you kind of like a follow-up to what Corey was just saying of like, do you think the problem is innovation and kind of like we're moving so fast that we're not really realizing that we're solving, like we're papering over things? Or do you think the problem is a lack of reflection?
Bondor and I were talking before we started. There was a sort of a debate that he's been in on X. Somebody essentially complaining that they are not able to make enough money to survive in this cycle. It's like a downward spiral into homelessness. And Bondor was very generously saying, essentially what amounts to, you should start saving your money in Bitcoin so that you see the value of your money go up. And when you try to tell people of the generation that we're in, that we have the ability to reclaim our sovereignty, and it gives us it's a responsibility that we have now, because we now can see the value of what we have growing, and then we can deploy it how we see fit. But for an entire generation prior to us and the generation that we're in now, there has been so much money printed and given out that people are used to it. And they just, in general, people don't want the freedom because the freedom is scary. They want to be taken care of. They've witnessed money printing. They've witnessed social programs that they've benefited from. And they've liked that because the money just appears out of thin air, and it gets distributed. And sure, a few people get rich, but it eventually, the trickle down, it eventually gets to me. And so it's like the innovation is here. The innovation is Bitcoin, but that innovation gives you freedom, and people, our generation, are afraid of the freedom that Bitcoin provides, because they're like, well, yeah, I could get Bitcoin. What if I lose it? What if it loses value? What if I don't understand it? What if I don't? And they give a million reasons. And they're like, I would rather there was modern monetary theory where the government just prints enough money to pay the debt that we have, and then society just functions. And, if I'm unemployed, I just go and get unemployment. And if I need a house, I just go get Section 8 housing, and on and on and on. And so the problem, I think, is this generational thing, that my belief is that Bitcoin just exists. It's going to continue growing, continue being integrated until it takes over. And so you better get in, because Bitcoin is here and it's not going away.
Yeah. And well stated. This is like a real, like actually real argument that's being posted on Twitter in response to what I'm talking about, or the thread Anton's talking about. Which is, the person is asking, if you give, I offered to give them Bitcoin, like through the internet, which of course they were like, they asked, if you give me Bitcoin, will that show up on my, what do I have to like deduct that from my like childcare, like whatever thing, or like does that mean that like my stipend will be less, or how does that affect? I'm like, I have no idea. It's $5, but like, that's where their mind goes. It's like, wait a second, if I make that extra money, that's going to push me a little bit further out of the welfare cliff zone, which is going to be harmful to me because I'm not going to be getting the same amount of money, right? Why would I go through the effort of jumping through all these hoops of working, blah, 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 when I can just do nothing and stay on the welfare, like stay on welfare forever? Like, why would I ever do that? Oh yeah. Unbelievable. I just can't sometimes.
Corey,
Yeah, I mean,
oh, good. I was just say you have experience in real estate, so I'm curious, on that whole thing of like that mindset, like that I'm gonna call it the renter's mindset, but like, do you think that, like, where does that come from? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think the welfare program as well as Section 8 is a big one, and then the ways that we incentivized, we financially disincentivized the family, and there's a direct correlation with when we did that to the dissolution of the family, especially in the poorest communities. You can look at all of those things as a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature in my mind, and I think they're very principled people, and they're probably very compassionate people who thought they were doing really, really good things. And there are people who have received that money who really needed it at the time. And if that were to all go away, I would weep for those people that didn't have that. But I'd say by and large, when you provide value without someone giving value in a collectivist way, you've demolished their ability to ever provide for themselves again. I think it's incredibly hard to repair that. So there's a lot of good discussion to be had on each one of those policies and what's the best way to make it effective. But if you commit the original sin of providing value for someone who was able to provide for themselves, and now they don't have to, getting them back to providing value for themselves once they're off of that, once they haven't had to, just unbelievably hard. I don't know that it's possible in any sort of real way. And you can see it as, post World War II, as the wealth of America started to grow, our poverty rate fell from something like 40% to about 17%. And then we added an enormous amount of programs to take care of the poor, and the poverty rate stopped falling. And I'm so curious what would have happened if we hadn't done that. I don't know, honestly. I think there is a minimum that it can fall to. I think, like Jesus says, the poor will always be with you. There will always be a bottom 10% of society who is very, very incapable of providing for themselves in society. But it's a shame. And we've never been able to reduce the poverty level since we instituted all of these policies to take care of the poor, because it didn't incentivize them to get out of the poor class. So it's just, to me, it's just sad. And it comes from just a wild misunderstanding of human psychology and motivation and responsibility.
Another thing that's fascinating about it intellectually is that it has these practical implications, right? Like, as we've just described, these are real, tangible, rubber hits the road incentives that cause people to change their behavior. But those doesn't stop there. It like works its way through the intellectual edifices of everything. That's like it's not necessarily, like the homeless thing, etc. But like, no, actually, well, it's so complicated now. And like you basically, it's the building on the cornerstone argument. If we put together a visual image about what this looks like, if you haven't built a house and you remove the cornerstone of that house, everything else in the house is going to be like start cracking. The roof is going to be sagging. Like there's going to be pooled water in weird places. That's going to start mold, and then you're going to have to repaint these things, and the foundation is now like not even, so you have to put in new concrete. Like, you have to do all of these things, right? It works its way through the entire house. The fact that you don't have this missing piece that is part of the foundation. And when you don't, like, the consequences of that are, well, now you got to hire a guy to do the painting. You got to hire a guy to redo the roof. You got to do mold control. You got to redo all your pipes. You got to plaster everything again. And like all of that, it manifests itself in, getting back to the reality of it, is like the economic institutions in all of our higher education, all of them have bought into the system of fiat as the normative, regular way that everything should work and function. And so, why would we ever replace the fiat system with a system that works? Instead, we need to repair all of the little cracks and all the little crannies and do unbelievable amounts of work when we could just do the one fix that solves everything.
I think the biggest stain on humanity is equity. Is equality. Because I think like the biggest stain is equality, not equity. Because at the end of the day, if you have forced equality, then you can never have any equity in anything. Period. I think we would see a very different Los Angeles if we did not have such a lurch towards equality. Because at the end of the day, there just are unsightly people in some ways. I mean, that's just the truth here, right? It's like some people are miserly, some people are scoundrels. And then there are a lot of people who are really great and some people who can be taken advantage of. There's a lot of putting, like the notion that equality is important is essentially saying, I need to build a box that can hold these two magnets that are diametrically opposed to each other right next to each other. Like you're just asking for something to break or to go wrong. Because the thing is, if you have two, of the same magnet trying to push up against each other, they don't want to do it. What's going to happen is they're going to flip over and snap you. And so it's a terrible analogy, but I just think I think a lot about this as I'm driving through Los Angeles. We went and saw a house today, just kind of like looking around because there's like random things that pop up and like, oh, I want to go see that because it's like an ancient house from like the 1920s, and like those don't come up on the market very often. And so we want just to kind of go and look and see this like giant hacienda estate, and that was built in a different time, and it was built on top of a hill, and it was built at the time when to have that piece of property and to have the opportunity to build that thing, you had to have impacted a lot of people's lives because you had a hard asset. You had goods that, you were able to transact with that got you enough equity in your assets or in your contribution to society to afford you the opportunity to do that. And so the problem is we're losing out on so many great inventions and innovations because we're telling people, oh, we have to give the same number of equal outcomes to these other things. And it's like, equality does not guarantee success, but meritocracy can at least give the opportunity for it. Anyways, diatribe over.
Well, to tie that back to
on the meritocracy.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
You can go.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say there's a bell curve, and people are in general, people are generally average intelligence, and then you have geniuses on one end of the bell curve. You have complete idiots. I was going to use the R word on the other end of the bell curve. well, maybe it's a better analogy actually to say there are extremely bad people on one end of the bell curve. Most people are generally pretty good, and then you have like geniuses on the other side of the bell curve. The problem when the government mandates or a corporation, we're going to have equality, and so we're going to shake everybody up. And we're going to make sure that we have equal representation of blah, 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 instead of meritocracy. Well, if you just stick a genius in there, if that was going to happen, that's great. The genius is going to do great. If you stick a really bad person in there, that person can cause catastrophic problems. And the reality is, whether there's meritocracy or not, the geniuses, they're going to go and be geniuses no matter what. They're probably not even in the equation. They're doing their own thing. And so this idea of taking meritocracy out and doing equity or like forcing equality causes catastrophic problems because those extremely stupid or extremely bad people, when they're just forced into an organization or into a government, or it just causes really bad things to happen.
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to just caveat the word bad because I think you're, if anybody is like listening, I think that the word bad in this context is ill-equipped. Right? Like there is no reason I should drive a Formula One race car. Period. I just don't know how. But if we want equality in Formula One, yes, I will be the idiot who gets in that car and like will go 250 miles an hour straight into a wall. Like I volunteer. That sounds like fun. But I am not the person. Like if you want to have a working business of Formula One, like you just don't do that. And so I think that's the problem, is a lot of times, people start to look at the equality equation and they just, equality feels good. It feels good, right? I don't disagree with that. But the problem is, if somebody doesn't know how to fly an airplane, you probably shouldn't put them in charge of 350 people's lives, right? You just shouldn't. You should put somebody in that chair who understands and is equipped mentally, emotionally, physically, relationally. Like there are different temperaments for things that are actually like really, really good, right? There's a reason that, women are really good maternal figures, and that we have that name of a maternal figure, because at the end of the day, like that's what they were hard coded and programmed to do, just by God. But anyways.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's to bring this back to the original question we had, why do we keep doing things the same way when it's causing the problem, is I think there's a real humanist angle to the way that America has operated for about 100 years in increasing measure. And the best outcome for humanity, if you don't believe that humans are God-breathed sparks of the divine, the best thing that you can hope for is equality, because any difference in outcome then is an indictment on the value of that person. And especially in America, we've made the value of a person very similar to their net worth. We've also made it similar to their power, to their efficiency. And that's done to women is said, if you want to be as valuable as a man, then you need to be as valuable to the market as a man is. And almost all of them are not. Some of them are more, some of them are less, but they're definitely not equal. We're four guys who have fairly similar backgrounds with fairly similar worldviews, and we're also wildly unequal in almost every way that you could cut it up. And we're probably four of the most similar guys in LA, and we're still wildly unequal from each other. So you have this worldview that says, if it's completely humanist and says what's the best thing that we can do for humanity? Well, if there's no God-breathed spark of divinity in every person, then we need people to be on the same plane. And let's try to do everything that we can to make that happen. What happens when it all breaks? I guess we didn't do it hard enough. Let's do it more. Let's do more.
Vote harder.
Vote harder. Let's do more forcing of equality of outcomes. And that's where you get things like billionaires shouldn't exist, or that person shouldn't have that much money. That's logically consistent with a humanist perspective for the utopia of humanity. It's also hell, right? Like that utopia is what we would identify as hell. No one has any individuality. No one has any difference from one another. So I have to lay that, that kind of Christian worldview on top of it and say, the only way out of that, like generation to generation of Christianity can't do things the same way, because God is continually revealed in new, interesting, beautiful, glorious ways across generations. Like our children should not grow up and be dealing with the same things that we're dealing with. It's like a continuous growth. That to me is the antidote to trying to solve the same problems with the same solutions and just causing more of the same problem. But while we're in a humanist environment, I don't expect that to stop anytime soon.
So I think this is probably a good place to like transition to, okay, how does Bitcoin make this better? How, like, Corey, you just mentioned what you think a solution might be, and I think that's totally correct. How does Bitcoin make this better? JD, you were going to say something. I don't know if it's on this, but I'm curious to know. When
I
you're
was just
thinking about this,
talk about equality and the fact that I would like to have as amazing of a hairline as all of you guys, but I do not. So the equality of hairline here is really frustrating for me, who has equity in my grandfather's hairline that is going to see my hair back here very soon. So that was the main thing I was going to say. But yeah, no, I think the positive spin on this is I think actually Bitcoin is the first attempt at equality ever. And what I mean by that is equality is truth. And I think that's not to be confused with equality of outcome. But like the only thing that we can all be equal in is the binary of truth. Something is true or it is false. And like equality is the equation, right? Like it needs to be one 1 + 1 = 2. That's true equality. True equality is balance, right? But I think that's the issue. Is too many people confuse the desire to instantiate balance in a system with the and like trying to predispose a balance in the equation with the fact that you cannot ignore all of the variables within that system. And so the biggest issue with equality is people. And why Bitcoin is great, and the hope that I have is when you use code that's open source that everyone can read, you have equality of seeing the whole framework play out. It's all there. Everyone can see it. And you have equality of you have a quality of understanding of there are 21 million of these things and there will never be any more. And so it's the first opportunity for us to look at true equality as something we can put into the system of humanity, of human society to make it better. It's like that actually does make me really, really optimistic that, with this utopia that people want could actually come about, because the only way you get there is through equality, and equality is actually like having all the cards out there for everyone to see.
Can I give you a hypothetical? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Anton. I don't want to jump in.
No. Go ahead.
Go for it.
So like a hypothetical, as we look at from the formation of central banking, where you see most of this modernism and postmodernism and progressivism rises from there and then accelerates in 1971. If you imagine that we were on a Bitcoin standard from 1913 on, there's no central bank, and all of those policies, everything top down that we've done, that we've voted for in order to force equality of outcome, had to be actually paid for by taxes by the people in that moment to make those things happen. How many of those things do you think happen? How big do you think we let USAID get? How many wars do we actually fight, right, to liberate the people of the Middle East to take their oil, or whatever that thing is, right? Department of Education, right? How many of those things do we do if you actually have to be truthful about what they cost, and then you have to report back to the people who actually paid for it, the citizens, did it work? Right. And then you have to be really, really honest about saying, all right, what if that actual tax rate was there and we hadn't printed any money and we've spent the same amount of money? One, that would have been impossible. But two, we would have higher than Norway tax rates. So you'd have a population saying, all right, 70% tax rates in order to elevate the poorest and to bring down the richest. Is it working? Are we happy with this society? I think the level of tolerance for that from normal people who are productive in society would be basically zero. So that's, how does Bitcoin fix it? We can't do it backwards for the last 100 years, but we can do it for the next 100 years and find out. I think it'll be dramatically different.
You can actually do the numbers on that, Corey. You just take the national debt and something like divide it by the number of households, and it's whatever, over $200,000 of debt per household. It's like that cost, which is a rolling cost that we pay interest on. Just imagine that was just applied. Everyone owed that today to get out of the debt, right? That's literally what the economic political cost is. It's
that's my first
destroys so much of America. It's just gone.
I actually think, though, not to cut you off, Corey, but I actually think that is the solution. I think if you sent everyone a $200,000 tax bill and said, by the way, you're on the hook for this, and just started us there, and everyone in America had to now crawl out of a $200,000 hole, it would immediately change the worldview of everyone overnight, because they're just I agree.
But that's what I'm getting at. This is my first question for people when I start orange pilling them is, how do you feel about our government spending? And when you look at the national debt, that's for the stuff that you already have. That's not even for the coming promises. That's for everything that you have right now. Are you happy with your infrastructure? Are you happy with your education? Are you happy with your healthcare? Are you happy with your military spending? No one is. No one is happy with any of that. And it's cost you $200,000 per household in debt. That's insanity, right? So I think, how could Bitcoin not undo that, right? You actually have to, for the people in charge to actually have to get permission from people to pay for these things and then report about how it went.
And not even just report, it would all be on, ideally, it would all be on publicly known Bitcoin addresses. So you can actually have any autist just go through and look at every single cent that was spent and who it was spent to and how it works through the system and what it touches. It's mind-boggling the amount of transparency you have all of a sudden. Anton.
Yeah. Did you guys see this is going to date the show a little bit, but Ben Shapiro interviewed Vladimir Zelensky, the current president of Ukraine, and he was asking about the $200 billion that the U.S. has given to Ukraine and asking about an audit. And then Zelensky just went on and on, like rambling, I don't even know. I could not follow what he was saying. It sounded like he was just trying to cause a distraction because he was like, please don't audit. I have no idea where this money went. And when there's a Bitcoin standard, you can't just print $200 billion. That's such an asinine, huge figure of money that we have no idea if it did anything to stop a war. It definitely killed a lot of people. And in the future, we will decide if we want to spend that money to give to a foreign country to fight a war. And the reality is we're probably gonna be like, no, we'd rather just have peace. So we're not going to give you money for tanks and for drones and anyway. There was one other thing I wanted to say about this. And that's just that the progressive idea is that there's like systematic racism, and there are these systems that oppress certain groups of people. And Bitcoin is the exact opposite of that. Nobody controls it. And so there is no systematic oppression or systematic racism in Bitcoin. Bitcoin has no idea what gender you are, how you identify, what race you are. It doesn't even know what country you come from. And I can use the example of a friend of mine from Bhutan. He's a Bhutanese citizen. And there's like this stuff in the news about Bhutan is like the next country like El Salvador that's going to use Bitcoin as a currency, which is not true at all. Their government is mining Bitcoin. They supposedly have 8,000 Bitcoin or something like that, but citizens have no ability to get it. I don't know why, but the Bhutanese can't even interact with the credit card systems in the rest of the world. So the Bhutanese don't even have a way to get Bitcoin. So I sent him some Bitcoin just because I just think it's cool that I can just instantly send value over, Facebook Messenger. I just said, hey, send me your receiving address. Boom. He got it. He sent me a screenshot of the Bitcoin. Now he has Bitcoin. It doesn't matter that he's a Bhutanese citizen. And that is equality. It's incredible equality in money that has never existed. It doesn't care about your citizenship. It doesn't care about anything.
Yeah. Love it. For me, I think the answer is that, how does Bitcoin make it better? It's like immediately goes to the Cantillon effects for me, or however you pronounce Cantillon.
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 Cantillon. There we go.
I think that's French, and I think he was Irish, but whatever.
It's kind of the same thing.
I'll just say Cantillon. The Cantillon effects basically say like whoever's closest to the new money printer gets access to the new money first. And because of that, they get to spend that money first, but they have to go through the process of organizing budgets and getting contracts and, breaking ground and building and spending. And it's a whole, cycle that slows down how the money makes it to the next closest, circle of influence. Now you just play that through, and each time somebody gets more money, they can then afford the next best, greatest thing that they were going to buy. So they bid up prices. And when you bid up prices, that's what the inflation is. So the inflation is working its way through the economy. And then by the time the new money gets to the people who are the most disenfranchised, the most homeless, the most like disconnected from abilities to make work, or not make work, but make money, do work and make money. By the time the new money gets to them, not only is it significantly less than, because everybody took a cut along the way, so there's hardly any money that gets to them, if it gets to them at all. There's also inflation that they now have to deal with. So it's almost like a slap in the face, right? And you can think about this very practically, which is, well, all the money inflates. The only way before Bitcoin, the only way that you could save money was by hard assets. For most people, the only accessible hard asset you could get was buying a house. Sure, you could do gold, but you're going to run into all sorts of problems that we've gone over ad nauseum. For most people, the best way to save would be to buy a house. Okay, but what does it cost to buy a house? It's like $400,000 on average anywhere in America, or average for America, which means you're going to have to pay something like a $300 or $3,000 monthly payment. So for anybody to save any money, they essentially are, if you can't do the $3,000 payment, you're precluded from saving any money, right? That's where you get this crazy welfare cliff. That's where you get the crazy, like, oh, well, you're just completely precluded, and then you have to, time preferences. I need to make decisions about my survival because I don't have the money, I don't have the backstop, I don't have the savings or anything else that allows me to participate and make quality, wise decisions. Instead, I need to sleep with this person or I don't have a place to sleep, right? It's like messed up system. Now, with Bitcoin, anybody who's homeless or otherwise can immediately start saving money without any other pretext or any other like requirements to get there. And that just completely levels the entire playing field. The person who's homeless has the same access to the money as the person who is literally the insider at the top of the game, worth hundreds of millions. It's just complete even playing field.
Yeah, and I think, one of the ironies of the Biden administration was that it was intended economically to bring a more level playing field. And what he did by printing $10 trillion, and Trump did too, right? It's not really a partisan thing, but Trump wasn't trying to level the playing field in the same way. We've just basically since 2008, we've had a blanket print as much money as possible. It's not really a Republican Democrat thing. Why I find it ironic with the Biden administration was that the intention was to level the playing field. But specifically because of the Cantillon effect, with 25% inflation in 4 years, the things that inflate the most are the things that are closest to the money printer, which are houses. It's the number one way that the money printer gets money into the American economy. It makes the middle class feel wealthier, nominally. Education, healthcare. These are where the costs go up the most. Car insurance. So the costs rise faster for the lower and lower middle class, everyone who doesn't have an asset, and the felt wealth is everyone in the asset class. You go from low, middle, upper class to asset class, non-asset class, and the divide that we saw over that same time period between the asset class and the non-asset class is the one that got the biggest. It grew dramatically, and that's the devil of it, right? So how does Bitcoin immediately fix that? Very hard to say. How does it fix it over time? It prevents it prevents the inequality gap between asset class and non-asset class from happening because everyone's in the asset class at all times. It takes away the ability of the government to drive that wedge between rich and poor.
Yep.
Something that I've felt.
Sure.
I was going to say, as far as that goes, a few years ago, if you wanted to have the asset, you had to buy a house, and that was impossible for some people to buy the house. And so they're saving, and then the asset price goes up. After all that saving, the house is even further away from them than it was before. And so they keep saving, and then the asset goes up and it's even further away from them. So as they're saving, this idea of buying a house, buying this asset is becoming more and more impossible. Bitcoin lets you buy fractional amounts. And so as you're putting your money into Bitcoin, even if you're just putting in $10, $15, $25 at a time, you're getting a piece of the asset that is going up, because even with the Cantillon effect, that money also goes into the value of Bitcoin, and it's going to go more so as time goes on.
Mm-hmm. And the Cantillon effect is just one of the items. Another item would essentially be the education that comes when trying to understand Bitcoin, because as everybody experiences when they do their first Bitcoin transaction, it literally breaks your mind, right? Like everything you thought that was the way that systems could function when you encounter Bitcoin, it does not fit into any of the molds that you've known to exist. You do not know, until you send a transaction, you do not know how to think about it, really. And because that breaks your mind, so you have to figure out, or I mean, you don't have to, but in many cases, people will then sit down and be like, wait a second, I don't understand what I just did. I need to figure this out, right? And then it turns into this, I got to get educated about what is this? How do I protect this? How do I steward this well? How do I because how do I understand this? And you have to start asking and answering all these questions. And a lot of those questions lead a lot of people down the rabbit hole of, wait a second, what I thought was communism or what I thought was capitalism, those are actually just totally reversed. I was completely wrong about that. Or what I thought was helpful was actually just harmful to hundreds of people, because all of the structures and all of the values in our civilization are completely flipped on their head. And Bitcoin forces you to actually connect reality with the truth and value and go through that process of understanding all this stuff. Okay, well, what's going to happen as a result of that? Well, you're going to start to see people they're going to start to get to root solutions to problems, because they're all going to be on the same page about what the actual problem is and how to solve it. So we got root solutions now, as opposed to just kick the can down the road because we can't afford that. And everyone knows that it's a total fucking lie. So we shouldn't do that. It's politically and economically and every other idiot, just infeasible. And we just can't do that anymore. And everyone knows it. So there you go.
Yeah. That's good. Can I, this might be a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I'm fascinated by this in the Christian community as well, because we rip on commies a lot, and as we should. They deserve to be ripped on. But I'm curious about this in the Christian community, because there's this idea of what you do as a Christian, and it's informed by your eschatology, like what you think of the end times. And we don't have to go far down that rabbit hole. But this idea of dispensationalism is about 100 years old, 150 years old, maybe. Mm-hmm. This idea that the whole world's going to go away in a rapture, it's all going to burn up. And then everyone who's accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior flits away to a far off heaven. If you follow that logically back to today, the only thing of value that you can do as a Christian on earth is to make another Christian. That's it, right? If everything else on earth burns up, if there's nothing else eternal that you do, that becomes your entire value proposition. I personally think that mindset, which has completely taken over American Protestantism, and it's taken over just about nowhere else ever. It basically just exists.
It's a total fiat. Yeah, it's a total fiat.
That's what mindset, I'm saying. Yeah. I think that mindset among the Christian community has been allowed to happen because we're in a fiat system where generally things are not made with quality and increasingly are made without quality. So generally they do pass away. It's kind of a logical thought, right? And we keep trying to fix the problem of the issue of degrading culture by evangelizing people to American Southern baptism, right? That's
by evangelizing people to exit culture entirely.
Exit culture, and literally we're telling them, become a Christian so that you cannot care about anything that's going on with culture. And then 50 years after we implemented that strategy, we're like, why is culture so far away from us? Like, why are you so far away from culture? I don't believe you were ever called to disengage that entirely. So that to me is the Cobra problem on our side, right? This is, to call it out on ourselves. That's the one that really bothers me. And I think Bitcoin forces you to recognize the physical reality that is also God breathed, right? And I think we'll start to unwind that mindset naturally.
Absolutely. And kind of touches on the idea of with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. If your measure is just everything's broke, how everything's broken, none of this matters. The thing that matters is just evangelizing the lost. Well, the only measurement there is the number of evangelists or the number of people you evangelize. So
that's the success measure. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's going to happen is that your success will be measured and you'll have more people evangelize, but evangelism will be returned to you in the same way that you measured it, right? Instead of the quality of the evangelism, you'll get the quantity of the evangelism that you wanted, and the results will be culture falling apart, right? It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Anton, do you have thoughts on the Christian perspective?
Yeah, I mean, my last thought on that, just going off of what Corey said, is that it's kind of two sides of the same coin. So you have in America, what you're describing, Corey, you have this dumbing down of culture, like an escape from culture, an escape from the things beautiful. It's like, it's still Christianity, but it's the polar opposite of, like, if you go to Europe and go to cathedrals and look at the art there and look at the architecture, and you look at that and you're like, something was going on during this time period. This is incredible.
Something was going on during this 150 years to build this thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There were literally multiple generations building this thing. Like, the people who started it didn't even get to see the finish of it. And maybe their grandchildren didn't get to see the finish of it. It's like, so that's beautiful. But then now there's a massive amount of secularism in Europe, and there's a lot of atheism. And then you have like a country like Albania. You'd have to look this up, but I want to say it's the most atheist country to ever have existed. It had what was essentially a communist dictator. I think they burned down over 2,000 churches. It's technically more of a Muslim country, but it still is very, very secular and very non-religious. And it's all the same thing. It's all fiat. Fiat is what essentially destroyed culture. And we are going to see this circle come back, and Bitcoin is going to drive that. And you see it, like, in the Bitcoin community, there are so many people who are focused on creating things that are going to last multiple generations. They have a low time preference. We are preserving value for our children's children, and we're very conscious of it, that Bitcoin is this thing that can't be destroyed. And the value is going to go up. The number is going to go up. And we have no idea when that's going to be, but we're confident in it. And so we are slowly, whatever your strategy is, if you're dollar cost averaging in, and if you're, just working your job and saving in Bitcoin, you just know that you're preserving that wealth for future generations. And yeah, somehow this is all related to Christianity.
Well, going back to what I think JD was talking about it earlier, which is this idea that, like, oh, well, we had, like, the thing that mattered was that, like, for other generations, was that it existed at all. Then it was like the quantity mattered a lot, and then the, like, quality matters for us. But that kind of harkens back to this other idea of good, fast, or cheap. Choose two, because you can only choose two. If you choose good and fast, it's not going to be cheap. But if you choose fast and cheap, it's not going to be good, right? You can only choose two under that paradigm. Of course, it's a simplification, but it's a useful simplification. In a fiat denominated world where your money always loses value over time, you try to build a new house, for instance, that new house is going to cost you a lot of time to build. Therefore, if your currency is being devalued, the house is going to cost you more if it's not built fast. And that kind of applies to everything in the entire economy at various levels, because all inputs and outputs take time to produce. So everyone always chooses fast. Now, they'll then have to choose either good, fast and good, which means it's super expensive, or they'll have to choose fast and cheap, which means it's not good, right? And you can kind of see, well, that explains our culture. We have essentially very few things that are really, really good that very few people can actually afford. And then by and large, everything else is just fast and cheap, and it just gets faster and cheaper because everything is predicated on, like, efficiency. And you got to go, like, Saifedean talks about it in the fiat standard, or the Bitcoin standard. Like, all the new inventions, all the quality inventions all happened over 100 years ago. And since then, we've just been pushing on the efficiency. Make it go faster, make it go faster, make it go faster, make it faster. Like, how do we produce this faster and more efficiently? Okay, so under a Bitcoin world, we no longer have to choose fast. And everybody who's into Bitcoin, has the low time preference, understands actually choosing fast might be a problem. It actually might harm me, because if I get that house as fast as done as fast as I can, and I spend my Bitcoin on the fast house, and it's poor quality, it's not going to be a very it's not going to retain its value as much as a house that'll be that's a high quality house. So you immediately it changes the dynamics of how people think about how they interact with reality and how they create culture. They get to now choose. Do I want it to be fast? Do I want it to be good? And everybody gets to choose. Do I want it to be fast? Do I want it to be good? Or do I want it to be cheap? And the outcome of that is that we're going to see a heck of a lot more things that are actually good, that are beautiful, that are true, that resonate with people, that last a long time, that are high quality. It's going to be awesome.
I agree. That's a good.
Yeah, that was well said.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's also an hour. We could cut it off there if you guys don't have anything else.
Yeah. That's
final thoughts, Anton, Corey?
The only thing I'd add to that is that the value proposition under a fiat world has to be money. What's beautiful about what you're saying, Bondor, is the value proposition for an individual has money somewhere, but for the majority of humans, money is not the top of their value proposition.
Yes.
So for an individual who wants to build a house, they would rather build a strong, sturdy, beautiful, enduring house for their family than they would have the marginal extra dollars of, So when the costs come down under a Bitcoin standard to meet that, then you get to see the individuality of people's value seep through into the goods, into the architecture, into the culture, in a way that they've been flattened by forcing money and speed and efficiency to the top of everyone's priority list, artificially forcing it to the top of their priority list. And that's not where it should be. It's not where it normally is.
And just as a gut check, you actually see it in the architecture, architecture or any, go to any place that has any downtown that has it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's ridiculous. You basically look at the architecture for anything that was built over 115 years ago, and it has these intricate ornamentation and the stone and the staircases. It's gorgeous, beautiful stuff. And as you go forward in time, the Bauhaus kind of art, design, ultra minimalist A-frame, just all of the ornamentation just kind of exits, and you get to our modern office building, which is literally just a sheet of glass and concrete floors, right? There's absolutely, and they're oh, we're going to do a pointed roof. That's some ornamentation there. It's bro, it's literally just a flat sheet of glass. There's absolutely nothing interesting or intricate or human scaled about any of it. It's just as cheap and as fast as we can go. Mind-boggling. So all of that goes out. We get to see the ornamentation again. We get to see the individuality of it. Someone's perspective, they can actually afford to produce their perspective of reality in reality, whereas they couldn't before. It was just, you got to do the A-frame or whatever. It's going to be awesome, man. So stoked.
Can't wait.
And
I want to say one last final thing about this. Let's say that you want to, so Altadena here in Los Angeles just burnt down. Let's say you want to build a house. Well, if you don't do it quickly, the cost to build that house could be double next year. And so if you want to build a house, you're I got to build it now. Well, if you have to build it now, you have to build with what you have. And you can be sure that style of architecture is not going to be a popular style 30 years from now. You don't even know if the house is going to last 30 years, but what does it matter? Well, if you put your money in Bitcoin, you can be sure that over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, the value of what you put into Bitcoin is going to 4x, 10x, 100x. If you can wait, you will be able to build classic architecture. You can take the time to think it through. You can build a house that is going to be valuable 100 years from now because it is this classic architecture. That house to build now is going to cost you millions and millions of dollars. You may not have the ability. Bitcoin is going to give people with the patience and understanding to put the value of their toil into Bitcoin. It's going to give them the ability to build things that last. And that's beautiful.
Love it. Correct.
Great.
All right, guys. We should call it there. Thanks for coming on.
guys.
It's Better by Bitcoin. Thanks for listening at home, everybody. Peace. Thanks for tuning in to Better by Bitcoin. Bitcoin makes everything better. Like, subscribe, and follow us on X at BetterBYBTC, YouTube at BetterBYBitcoin. Not financial advice, mathematical certainty.